Hey guys, Kyle here, classroomdespairs.com, and today we're going to be working on something different. This is going to be a matchless rear hub. This is off of my dad's, I believe, G11 or G12, 1959, somewhere in that area. So it's definitely going to be a little bit different for me, but as far as the machine work goes, I've done many similar things like this. So today's focus, we're going to be working on the brake drum, and that will basically consist of mounting the drum to the hub, getting the hub and the drum in the lathe, and then turning the inside diameter of the drum itself. So the drum is used, it's definitely salvageable. There's some pitting, but for the most part it definitely looks like it is in good shape. So as you can see, the drum basically pushes on the pegs, and then the axle and washer will lock it in place. So here's a mandrel that I made. I did make this for the front drum, and it will happen to work with the rear drum. I did have to make new sleeves. Each sleeve is a very snug fit into the drum, which will replace the bearings, and I honed the inside diameter of each sleeve so it's less than 1/1000th clearance on the shaft itself. So it's a very tight fit, very rigid, and we should be able to do the job. So first things first, we are going to clean the mandrel. We want to make sure that there's no dirt, there's no debris, there's no grime. Considering that the sleeve itself, like I said before, is about less than 1/1000th clearance, it's a very precise and precision fit. And the reason why I spent so much time on these components just for a brake drum is because we really want to make sure that when the drum is on the hub, that is going to be concentric. So one might say, why don't you just turn the drum in the lathe? Well, you can center up on it, but it wouldn't necessarily replicate the same as if it's on the drum or bolted to the drum. So this is why we spent so much time making these components for this specific job. But as I always say, once you have the tool made, you can pretty much do any job and it'll last a lifetime. So we're lubricating the outside diameter of each sleeve, and as you see there, it's a very snug fit. That way it slides nice in, it doesn't gall anything, it doesn't move any material. And then we'll lubricate the outside of this one. So we're basically using some high pressure grease, nothing special, just something on here to lubricate it as it's being pressed in. Give it a good tap. I was having a little trouble there. Like I said, it's a snug fit, so it's got to go in square or else it'll go in crooked, and then obviously you can't get it in there. Just checking for any type of burrs just to make sure why it's not going in. Bingo, so we got it. Alright, so now that both sleeves are pushed in, we are going to get the mandrel, and then we're going to lubricate the mandrel. I turned an undercut on the shaft. Sometimes lathes will turn slight tapers, and if I want a very tight fit, it's better for me to cut an undercut and focus on two different areas. Both of the dimensions or the journals are the same, and so everything works out better this way. So we're sliding the mandrel in place. The mandrel is going to essentially act as if it was the axle, and the sleeves will act as the bearings. So essentially what you have here is almost like a complete hub assembly that we will put in the lathe, and this way it makes it a lot more accurate when you're turning. So we're going to put the washer and the nut on one side, above one side of the spacer, and then we'll tighten it up once we get to the lathe. And then my dad was in the background. He gave me a washer that he bored larger to fit over the axle, or the mandrel, I should say. I'm sorry. So here we're at the Acra lathe. We're using a Atlas 5C collet chuck, and we are sliding the hub mandrel into the lathe. Alright, so we're sliding the tailstock into the center of the mandrel, and we're basically preparing the drum itself to tighten the washer and the nut that's going to retain the hub itself. There's going to be two different locking methods here. So I'm locking the drum to make sure that it's tight on the mandrel, not only to stop the drum from moving out, but I'm actually locking it in place to stop the drum from rotating, so essentially spinning on the mandrel. All right, now that the locking nut is tight, we are going to grab the brake drum and we're going to fit the drum to the hub. It's a really nice fit. All right, so now that we have that in place, we're going to grab our washer, then we're going to grab the nut, and then we're going to lock the drum to the hub. And as you noticed earlier, that there is a washer and nut on the inside, that's to be able to lock the hub, and then now we're able to lock the drum to the hub. So I'm just checking clearance. Although the sprocket is not going to be above the slide, it's not going to be anywhere near there. We're just making sure before we actually start turning, because we don't want anything catastrophic to happen. With my right foot on the brake pedal and the lathe and low gear, we're turning the locking nut to make sure everything is nice and tight, and then we will work the tailstock in place. What I'm doing here is doing a check for runout. So I'm not just throwing the axle on or the mandrel on and then the drum. We're actually measuring some things here because we want to get this thing running as true as possible. So that's probably no more than 1/1000. So in my honest opinion, I think that's pretty damn good. So we will have a nice concentric running brake drum. So I got my magic marker here. This is the Magnum size, which is very handy. And I'm just basically sweeping the inside of the brake drum, and that's going to help us identify the high and the low spots when we start to turn the drum. I'm using the marker to mark the peg and the drum, and essentially what I'm doing here is indexing the two together. So when I'm done turning the brake drum, when my dad gets ready to bolt it for final assembly, that will ensure that the drum will be in that same spot, because that's how we turned it. So that quick clip was my Micro 100 boring bar, which is carbide. We're just checking the length and the actual depth to make sure that that shank of the tool is long enough. So here I'm doing a very first pass. We're just going to take an absolute little amount of material off, as much as we can, just so we can kind of see the high and the low spots visually. And you'll be able to see that come up, especially with the marker on the brake drum surface. So obviously surface finish is ideal. We want to get the best finish that we can. So I went ahead and dropped it down. I believe it was 127 RPM, and I lowered the feed rate. And we're just taking a little bit of a heavier cut, not very much. And as you can clearly see, there is an out of round condition. And again, this is why I wanted to bolt the drum to the hub and turn everything as an assembly, because what we see here is exactly how it would be if it were on the motorcycle. So I didn't feel comfortable just turning the drum and then, you know, say, hey, I think that's going to be good. And then when you put it on the hub, it's going to be out of round. It's going to be eccentric. So this way we know that everything is concentric to each other. So again, we're just doing a heavier cut. That Micro 100 boring bar is doing really well. It's a carbide boring bar. And as you can see, that's the feed rate that I'm at. So we slowed it down. And so we want to be able to get a really, really good surface finish as best as we possibly can. So if you can hear very closely, you might notice that the sound is more consistent. That is simply because the brake drum is round and it's cutting all the way around the circle itself. So we went ahead and finished that up. There was like one spot you might see that didn't touch, but it's fine because we don't want to remove any unnecessary material. For the most part, about 99.9%, the drum is fine. Using that file to break the edge so there's no sharp edges, and basically just giving it that finished touch. So the brake drum is complete, and my dad should be really happy about it, and it should definitely give him better stopping power on the rear of the bike. You're not going to get that pulsing feel or any type of squeaking and things of that sort. So the finish is good. You might get some Scotch-Brite, kind of scuff up the inside, give it a nice crosshatch, but for the most part, it's definitely good to go, and it is definitely salvageable. All right, so that's pretty much going to sum it up. We'll get some shots of the drum. But if you guys like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Check out our website, classicbitofspares.com, and check us out on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You guys have a great day.